A few streets from home, I ran into Colleen of all creatures, and she was in a social mood.
I knew she was probably more interested in the sparrow hanging out my mouth than how I was, but I slowed down for a few mews anyway.
She seemed a lot bigger than I remembered.
"Gee, you're looking fat," I said. "Thanks," she said.
Did you make it on the inside part-time? I said. Find yourself a feeder? I have a butcher friend, so maybe we can do a trade. No, I'm having kittens, she said. With Jarface. Ain't that great? Actually, I almost vomited up some gold lick right there and then. Jarface. A Tom with crow splat in his bones. Mutt spray in his veins and shriveled pink lump for a brain. That was her choice. I was going to ask, she said. Do you know any good places to den? I'm on the lookout.
"I'm not really the best cat to ask," I said.
I thought you might have some tips on finding alleys, she said. You found yourself a good one, didn't you? Not too bad, I said rather proudly. A little out of the way, but close enough to what I need. Sofa to sleep in, pet shop lane a few streets stalk, and Carl the... I suddenly shut my mousetrap. As Colleen's whiskers lifted and she widened those green eyes at me, I realized what the play was. She wanted a lot more than my sparrow. And now I went into damage control. We'd been heading straight for my alley, but I immediately crossed the road, changing direction too. You can't move into my den, I said. It's just temporary, she said, until I've raised my little ones. Absolutely not, I said with a warning snarl, cocking my sock paw, claws drawn. What are you going to do? She said. Attack a poor mama cat now? She wasn't so poor when she pranced off with my flapper that time at the park bridge. Honestly, I still owed her a cat slap for it. Anything to defend my den, I said. If you want to play Tom and fight for territory, then that's what we'll do, and it won't be some house cat rolly-polly. My mother used to tell me don't be too rough with she cats, but if they try turning Tom, they're fair game. Well, she said, I'm guessing you can't guard it all night if you want to eat, and I have your scent, so there's a good chance I track you down eventually. What can you do if I just happen to give birth in your sofa one evening? Are you really going to tear those helpless little meowers out like some rabid drool demon? What a manipulator this feline was, huh? The thing is, I could easily fight her off in a territorial dispute. This was a she-cat, come on. In some domesticated house den, Toms and she-cats might seem similar, living their comfortable lives, eating from their overflowing bowls. I'm sure double-brained porkskins are deranged enough to believe they're just the same. Have the hindwalkers locked out their dens though, and their kitchens cleared out by crows, so those housecats have to fight for the last scraps, fight for their survival. Now let's see how similar they are. The Toms will be slinging them round like week-old kitty crawlers. But this she-cat was right in a sense. I might easily drive her off if I was home, but I couldn't do that while lurking the lanes. And I likely couldn't evade her forever if she was hell-bent on stalking me to uncover my lair. She was a stray meower after all, with some bandit credentials of her own. I wasn't sure whether I had it in me to throw her kittens out for the hounds either. What if I couldn't go through with it due to overwhelming meowfolk loyalties and all? I needed something more lasting than cat slaps to back her off for good. Even hide holes for that matter. Since for strays that might just be a morning howdy-do gone wrong, and they've forgotten about it by afternoon nap. I needed something to at least make her think twice, ideally twice again after that if she could count that far, about coming anywhere near my den. Don't think it's all purrs and kittens in that alley of mine, I said. Recently some homeless hindwalkers have taken over the whole territory. That's a shame, she said, but I'd be cooped up away from all that. And they've set up oil drum fires, scaring all the prey off, I added. Actually, warmth is a real necessity right now, she said. Can't have my kittens freezing if the frosts hit. I can just hunt down the block instead, I'm sure. I'm telling you, my den had become her obsession.
These characters are definitely not cat lovers, I said.
Everything with a false hide falls for kittens, she said. Even those most crippled with muttmania. One look and they melt like gold lick on toast.
I chewed my own brain to squeeze out any last juicy thoughts, careful not to pop the wrinkles of course, because I was dangerously close to adopting a feral litter at the first ill-timed late-night lurk.
You're right, actually, I said. They love kittens. They've even tamed a pack of stray hounds to sniff out mama cat dens, because kitten meat is far more tender. They're cat eaters, you see. They've been spotted roasting kittens on fire pokers, and believe me, it's the kittens being melted like gold lick this time. Some think these hindwalkers are aiming to start up a cat cuisine restaurant to strike it rich. And now they're hunting litter after litter to perfect their recipes. Really? She gasped. I snarled angrily in confirmation. Those monsters, she hissed.
And things have gotten so bad, I said, that mama cats are now delivering porch scraps to these cat killers to buy them off, even the tracker hounds, so they'll leave their kittens alone.
You need to move out of there, she said. And feeding scum like this, those felines are just keeping our enemies alive. The irony of not wanting scum fed while growing a batch of scum-tom scumbags to suckle was clearly lost on her. I'm looking for a new lair as we speak, I said. And I better get back to it. There are plenty of nooks and crannies around. I'm sure you'll find something to stuff your litter into. Hopefully the boot of a parked motorcar. I was thinking, leaving town the next morning, a real rainy morning, so it might just skid off a bridge along the way.
And with that, I scooted off. Colleen didn't follow for now at least, still stunned by the news.
And I was hopeful it was enough to save my lair from Jarface's litter. Just imagine it, these little meow brats with assorted jar lids his vet slung on to match, infesting my sofa. Then Jarface stopping by and picking fights because he thinks I'm interfering with his fatherhood or something.
No thanks. I didn't need that on my plate, especially considering how much I'm missing from it. Some might claim at least I'd finally have some milk in my saucer if Kitty Mama Colleen was staying. Meower milk is still the best milk around, right?
Well, I can't see how she'd manage to donate any to my saucer, since cats don't come with bottle caps, and don't even talk to me about suckling alongside her meow brats, fighting for a spot. I've made it clear I'm not far away from a proper Tom life. You think I'm going to line up in a suckle line after a night out on a Badlands prowl? I would look absolutely ridiculous. Anyway, the practical reality when it comes to milk is that the milk of the hindwalkers is not far off cat quality and definitely delicious when creamy. But most of all, they've got far more left over after suckling their bald kittens. So much they can fill countless bottles with it. And I'd rather hold out for that kind of milk supply, one that doesn't come with an invading family of ferals. Look, I don't want to give the idea I have something against kittening and mama cats. Believe me, I see plenty carrying their kittens back to the den and raising them well, and it's a wonderful thing. The more meow folk, the better. Yes, even though some will grow up to be threats to snatch my rats and steal my veal. But you have to think of the big picture, and this is a turf war, cats against the world, you better believe it. And mama cats are needed to play their part, to do their duty. Having kittens and then devoting yourself to them, fighting for them, teaching them how to pin a pinktail and a fantail too. On the surface it might not look as flashy as ripping up rivals or securing new neighborhoods and other Tom-type stuff. But raising new meow folk is a damn honorable thing, and pretty necessary if we don't want to disappear from our hard-won territories. One day I expect to be interested in starting a family of my own, of course. If I'm not eventually going to be leaving behind little Mortys and Mortinas, I don't really know what the point of this struggle all is, to be honest. From a pure philosophical point of view, why even bother crawling out my den for another desperate deed if all I'll leave behind in the end is a bag of bones and a furred hide for those hobo scarves? But the key thing is it's got to be my family stuffed in that sofa, not sired by some other Tom, and definitely not a scum Tom vomited from the dodgiest dens of Gloomtown, soaked to the marrow with inglorious grot. Walking home, I couldn't help being overcome with a fierce philosophy storm all of a sudden and getting pretty angry thinking about cat families. Realizing with this Colleen episode how conflicted I was about it all too. I had to ask myself, why if I thought the more meow folk the better did I hate the idea of Colleen having jar-faced kittens? It wasn't just about not wanting them stuffed in my sofa, because I didn't want them stuffed anywhere in the end. And it wasn't just that they weren't mine, because I didn't only want them in their own alleys out of my way. I wanted them driven out of town, and over those slippery bridges. I figured these feelings were more than just normal competitive instincts. I wasn't even quite ready for fatherhood anyway, and the main reason turned out to be quite simple. I knew that Jarface was nothing more than a dumb animal. And I'm not saying he's dumb just because he's my rival. Crows are my rivals, and I admit they're not dumb. Jarface wasn't even the dumbest out there, and could actually put some thoughts together on a good night. He even made a poem once. And it's not about him being an animal, necessarily. We all have the animal inside, don't we? Most of us on the outside too. But he was a dumb animal. And that's a very particular type of creature. When you're dealing with dumb animals, you just know it as soon as the interaction starts, unless you're a dumb animal yourself, then maybe you can't see the rats for the mice. But I can even tell with pork skins. Their dumb animals are like a completely different breed, even the way they live, speak, and behave. Lower life forms. You could even mistake them for a separate critter kind entirely. You could also say scum and dumb animals are more or less the same thing, generally speaking. But that gets complicated too. If you philosophize deep enough, you realize some scum is actually smart and some dumbos aren't truly scum. Just simpletons who can't fill a skull box, living their mindless, senseless lives. There seems to be a lot of overlap there, though, between scum and empty skull boxes, that's for sure.
And in the end, the reason I was so agitated with Colleen's news is that I knew deep down that the jar faces of this world having kittens all the time, it must really hold us back as meow folk.
Firstly, although this isn't the most important thing, if we want to overtake dogs as the hindwalkers' favorites around town, we've got to seriously improve our ways. It's one thing complaining that dogs are man's best friend and get to ride in motorcars and go on park picnics and have the whole town cater to their needs, but you know what, as horrible as they are, bark beasts probably are better companions in the end. Could you imagine a typical cat helping to guide a blind man around all day? On duty, they'd be so busy grooming their ears or striking a pose at pedestrian crossings. The hapless hindwalker would be rammed dead by motorists on the first morning. Or on guide duty at a park bench, the average meower would just take a noon-to-night nap on the warm planks, leaving the blind to the mercy of the crows, who'd rob him dry, raiding the whole lunchbox in every pocket, and maybe even tweezering out an eyeball, since it was broken and couldn't see it coming.
But more importantly, if meowfolk want to make cat society itself more respectable, more capable, and just less bloody feral, we have to use some common sense. You don't need to be some expert philosopher to realize that what you really want are the best and most noble cats having the big litters and the worst and most graceless ones having the belly plagues and run-ins with traffic, ideally before any kittens come out at all. I mean, it's surely madness to give these low lives 9 lives of lowness to begin with. Even one seems a lot more than necessary in most cases. Probably the cat gods just lost control of the situation with all the critter mayhem down here, as I mentioned before. Now, some are going to say that if Jarface can barge his way to a big family, then he must be the better meower. But let me ask you this. If a rubbish truck can barge its way down a street and smash a group of motor cars up, even some pretty fancy ones with elegant physiques and beast-hide inside sofa seats, does that make the rubbish truck the better vehicle? Maybe for carrying filthy garbage it does, but not for much else. Sure, you still want your cats to be mighty, but it should come with other abilities too. I'm sure the cat gods didn't get to their position just by throwing the most mindless feral weight around.
Some would also say, well, what right do I have to talk about cat quality when I'm a stray ratbag myself? To that I'd say this. Stray ratbags aren't all created equal. Some of us are higher up the grimy staircase, and nobility isn't directly tied to the inside, let alone being a coddled fur cushion. Some of those cats are just soaped-up ferals who lucked out on life in a very indulgent part of town. And some of the strays are from good families who once got lost in the backstreet badlands. The whole point is that when I gathered my thoughts on all this and groomed them a bit to straighten out the stray furs, I concluded that yes, meowfolk definitely need to keep up a good level of kittening, or we'll just die off like the last autumn leaves from a park tree. And yes, that territorial critter war is real. Numbers count. Fight a mutt pack and see. But if we ever want to come close to the heights of the cat gods, get back to the level of our original unpolluted litters, we also have to make sure the right cats are having our kittens so we don't end up a scum race of jar-lidded abominations even the sewers shut their lids to. And even the cat gods might one day abandon.
We definitely don't want the divine felines getting too disappointed and starting from scratch again. Or end up like those failed cat squeaks that couldn't live up to meower standards and were tossed in bins then turned into the scavenging rats of the world. There's no coming back from that. Well, I actually ended up heading in the opposite direction to my alley for quite a few blocks that night, because I was worried Colleen might still try to track me home and break into my den. That was on top of the usual tension you have in this situation, trying to get to safety with fresh belly filler on full display between your jaws, wafting its goodness off every wall. And as I trotted down the pavement, my fur was half raised, knowing that with every passing lane and lurkhole, some flashing eyes or flaring nostrils were following my every move, with a mind to snatch my catch.
You can sense them, smell them, hear them plodding away, biding their time. Pass too close to an ambush site and things can go from carry to parry in an instant, even if all you've captured is a dribbling half-shell with the yolk gone running.
On my long way home, I ran into Ernie Cross Eyes, there at his alley entrance, half-shadowed atop his 2-story cabinet den. A hindwalker had delivered that to him only recently, and stuffed it with a fuzzy blanket on the bottom floor and even an old cardigan for the upper level. So don't think he won it in a hard-fought contest and furnished it himself or anything. It's got real swinging doors and is more rainproof than a sofa, but pretty thin-walled for winter and not so great for naps on top. I wouldn't turn one down, but at the same time I wouldn't trade a tartan for it.
Ernie was a blotchy brown coat, not as malnourished as you might expect, doing what he does best, spotting fleas on his snout with those wonky eyes.
They were sort of the opposite to pigeon eyes, which just stick out sideways. But unlike pigeons, where if you're cross-eyed it's a lucky stroke, since you'll actually get both eyes on target and avoid splattering into trunks and posts, on a cat, cross eyes are no good at all.
Our eyes are perfect as they are, peeping straight ahead where all the action is, where we're actually creeping and running, pouncing and striking.
Even people got that one right, after failing so badly with their tails and claws, and not even managing a full face of fur, let alone a proper fur hide. In fact, I've only seen a handful of people in my entire life who've been able to grow fur over the majority of their bodies, all of them females, and still their coats were coming loose.
I'm kidding, of course. Even those hides were false. Well, by false I mean not their own, but that fur is real, all right. These female porkskins had got their men to skin some critters for them just to parade about the town, which is strange given how they go goo-goo over baby animals when anyone is watching. Maybe they just like petting them to see if the fur will be good for wearing to their next party.
But it was a real shame about Ernie's eyes because I'm sure it made life hard for him. First of all, I don't know how he even managed to run straight. It must be so confusing, one eye telling you to go left while the other says right, and your snout is in the middle arguing with them both. And then there's the hunting. He was probably fine when the things just lay dead still in front of him. That way he could lock right on them. But any further than a few cat lengths, and on the move, the peepers just wouldn't be cooperating, meaning the paws would be slashing blind.
Hey Ernie, I said, do me a favor, will you? If you see a she-cat, white with tan patches, coming this way, asking after me and looking like she just might den up in someone's alley and explode with kittens, send her on a flapper chase, will you? Then I figured maybe he wasn't the best set of eyes to play lookout for me. But beggars can't be choosers around here. Though that's not completely true. Sometimes there's quite a bit for beggars to choose from if they know how to locate leftovers. Ernie hissed at me then, but I didn't take it personally. He could have been hissing to anybody left or right up the entire street. Who knows where those wacky peepers were aimed? But as I was about to hop atop the cabinet to get a straight answer out of him, Ernie jumped down and scooted away across the street.
And it occurred to me that this was actually a special talent Ernie had with those skewed eyeballs of his, crossing the road. He could check for motor cars both directions at once. So that made two advantages, I suppose, this and being able to track those snout fleas right between his headlights.
I now leaped up onto Ernie's cabinet and discovered he'd left some meaty morsels out on a new plate decorated with Nars dressed in hats and suit hides running round the rim, with his cup of fresh water alongside, and not just a humble saucer of milk but a whole bowl of the stuff, deep enough to keep a pet finback in. He had his own little bloody restaurant up there. It was unbelievable. I certainly didn't turn down the hospitality, and put my sparrow aside to fill up the belly bag a little. Those treats were in pristine condition, and that's another advantage of the cabinet den, actually, being able to keep your crockery on the roof a little further out of bug and scurrier range. From high ground there, I sensed some critter activity in that little alley of his, flickering shapes and lively rustles and more than a few cents bouncing around, certainly in stalk range. But I ignored them, grabbed my bird, jumped down and made for home. And the reason I left like that is I try not to hunt in Ernie's territory. I could if I liked, and there's nothing much he could do, probably. But only a genuine backstreet bastard would do that to Ernie Cross Eyes. I'll share a meal with him if he's offering. Take a swipe of mince to lighten his bowl's load. But it's just bad sport to rob the guy's whole alley. Trust me, when you've seen the poor wretch struggling to catch a half-dead mouse, fumbling around because his peepers are busy having a stare out with each other, you just have to throw him a bone. Not literally. He's not getting any of my bones. Definitely not any fresh out of Carl's shop. But I'm prepared to give him a little leeway with the hunting grounds, just out of plain meowfolk decency. To be honest, the guy's plate never seems to be empty. Plate? Make that his whole dinner set, getting prettier by the day. He's actually kind of pampered. But hindwalkers are so fickle that can dry up at any time and he'll need to get back to the chase. I suppose you could say that's about as close as I got to camaraderie with a cat, and you saw what I got in return. The guy wouldn't do me a simple favor, or even stick around to share a few friendly mews over a meal. Anyway, I did finally make it home with my flapper catch intact, successfully running that evening gauntlet. I checked back one last time in case Colleen had managed to stick a decent stalk. But it wasn't a problem. She was probably off ruining catkind with another bad choice of toms for her next litter.